Hi kiddos, it's Mrs. Carrera. Today is Disney Day. You see my shirt and my favorite ears. Okay, I am going to read you a brand new story, so I hope you guys enjoy it. It's called Can You Keep a Secret? And this is a second grade level. It's a 2.9 and it has 2 points for a test if you guys are interested in taking a test. All right, this is by P.J. Peterson. Okay, we're going to start with chapter 1. Mike ran across the playground bouncing a big red ball. He felt great. They had 15 minutes to play wall ball before school started. Nate and Sam were bent over looking at something. "Watch out," Nate said. "Here comes Mike." Sam turned his back and put something into his coat pocket. "What's in your pocket, Sam?" Mike asked. "Nothing," Sam said. "Come on," Mike said. "You can tell me." Sam shook his head. "No way, you can't keep a secret." "I won't tell," Mike said. Nate laughed. "Yes, you will. You won't mean to, but you'll tell just the same." Mike stamped over to the ball wall court. He was mad. What Sam said was sort of true. Mike wasn't very good at keeping secrets. It was hard to know a secret and not tell somebody. And sometimes, even when he didn't want to tell, he gave away secrets by accident. Even so, he didn't like his friends hiding things from him. Mike put the ball on the ground by the "Do Not Kick Balls" sign. He kicked the ball hard. Harder than he meant to. The ball sailed clear over the wall. It even went over the net that was supposed to catch high balls. Mike heard it bounce on the roof. Mike ran to the side of the building. He waited for the ball to roll off the roof. But it didn't. It must be stuck up there, and Mike was in trouble again. But maybe not. Maybe nobody had seen him. Mike looked around quickly. People were busy playing two square and tetherball. Some older girls were standing in a big circle and giggling. The only person close by was Amy. She was carrying a vase full of flowers. "Hi, Amy," Mike said. Amy waved to him. "Did you see what happened to me?" he asked. "No," Amy said. "What happened?" "I just had a little accident," Mike said, walking away. He was safe. But his stomach felt funny, like he'd eaten too many pancakes. Nate came running across the playground. "Let's play wall ball," he said. "We can't," Mike said. Nate looked around. "Where's the ball?" "Don't tell anybody," Mike said. "I kicked it and it got stuck on the roof." Mr. Warren's on yard duty, Nate said. "Maybe you should go tell him right now." "I'll get in trouble," Mike said. Nate shrugged. "He'll find out anyway." "Maybe he won't," Mike said, but he had that bad feeling in his stomach. They walked across the playground, past some first-grade girls jumping rope. The girls were shouting out their rhyme. "You are ugly, you have germs, you should eat a can of worms." Mike saw Sam in a circle with some older kids. "What's Sam doing?" Mike asked. "Forget it," Nate said. "Let's shoot some baskets with Fred." Fred was the best basketball player in the class. He lived next door to the school, and he was always playing ball. "Did Sam bring another frog to school?" Mike asked. "No," Nate said, "but remember what happened that time?" "It wasn't my fault," Mike said. "I was just holding it for a second, and Mrs. Banks caught me." "You know why she caught you?" "Maybe somebody told?" he said. "All she had to do was look at your face," Nate said. "One look and she knew you were up to something." "Hey," Fred yelled, "you guys want me to whip you in a little game?" Mike and Nate played Fred in basketball 2 against 1, but Fred still beat them. While they played, Mike kept looking across the playground at Sam. Sam and another boy were down on their knees playing with something. The first bell rang. 14-10, Fred said. "I told you I'd whip you." Mr. Warren was standing by the steps. Mike's knees got shaky. Now his stomach felt like he'd swallowed cement. "Let's wait," Mike told Nate. "We'll go in just before the second bell." When they came close to the steps, Mike got on the other side of Nate. That way Nate would be between him and Mr. Warren. Mike kept his head down. He wouldn't look at Mr. Warren at all. Ahead of Nate and Mike, some 6th-grade girls were singing. One girl was dancing to the music. "I wish you were on the radio," a boy yelled. "Then I could turn you off." Mike felt a little better. With so many kids around, Mr. Warren wouldn't even notice him. The girl in front of him was wearing purple tennis shoes. She had written something on the soles in green ink. Mike watched those shoes go up the first steps and the second. He put his foot on the first step. "Mike," Mr. Warren called out. Mike went up another step. He pretended he didn't hear. "Mike," Mr. Warren shouted. There's a picture. There's Mike. There's Mr. Warren. Nate grabbed Mike's arm. "Mr. Warren wants you." People moved back and let Mike go past. Then they stood and waited, trying to hear. "Let's go, Mike," Mr. Warren said. They walked across the empty playground. Mr. Warren stopped by the 2 square courts and looked down at Mike. "What's the story?" "I went out to play wall ball," Mike said, "but I got mad and kicked the ball, and it went on the roof and got stuck up there. I didn't mean to." Mr. Warren nodded. "And you didn't tell anybody?" "No." "2 mistakes," Mr. Warren said. "What were they?" "I shouldn't have kicked the ball, and I should have told somebody about the ball on the roof." Mr. Warren smiled. 2 out of 2. You got 100% on the before-school quiz, so you know what you should have done. You just didn't do it. "How did you know?" Mike asked. "You had that look on your face," Mr. Warren said. "You stay after school today. Bring your books to my room." "Okay," Mike said. "I'm sorry." "You did something stupid," Mr. Warren said. "Everybody does that once in a while. Now hurry up. Try to get to class before the last bell rings." Mike ran for the steps. He was smiling. He had to stay after school, but that was all right. At least his stomach didn't hurt anymore. All right, Chapter 2. Amy watched Mr. Warren take Mike away from the steps. "He's in big trouble," one of the 6th graders said. Amy felt sorry for Mike, but she was glad Mr. Warren was gone. She knew a secret about Mr. Warren, and she felt funny being around him. She had kept her secret all to herself since last Friday. 3 whole days. It was an exciting secret, and a happy one. She wanted to tell somebody, but she didn't know who. Before she could have told Sarah. Sarah was her best friend, and they told each other everything. But 2 weeks ago, Sarah had moved to Arizona, and she hadn't even written Amy a letter yet. Amy needed a best friend right now. She wanted to talk about what she'd seen, but everybody seemed to have a best friend already. Amy walked into the classroom. Carla and Britt were whispering in the corner. Amy wished she could go over there and whisper with them. Some boys were standing around Sam's desk. She wondered what Sam had this time. Last month he'd gotten in trouble for having a frog, and before that he had a pet grasshopper. Amy kept glancing back, but she couldn't see what it was. Probably another frog, but she wished she knew. Mrs. Banks was digging through a big stack of papers. She always had piles of papers on her desk and on the bookcases, and she was always losing things. Mrs. Banks was one of the nicest teachers Amy had ever had, but she was also the messiest. Mrs. Banks looked up from her papers and said, "Thank you for the flowers, Amy. They're beautiful." Amy often brought flowers to school. Her parents owned a garden shop, and they usually had extra flowers. Amy liked making bouquets and giving them to people. That's how she had learned her secret. Last week, she had brought a bouquet from Mr. Warren's desk. On Friday, she was supposed to bring home the vase, but she had forgotten. After school, she'd gone shopping with her mother. On their way home, Amy had remembered the vase. Mr. Warren's car was still in the parking lot, so Amy had run into his room and pulled open the door. There, inside the room, she had seen the most amazing thing. Mr. Warren kissing Miss Dean, the kindergarten teacher. When they heard Amy, they moved apart very quickly. They acted like nothing had happened, and so did she. There's a picture of her catching them. Mr. Warren and Miss Dean. It was such a surprise. Lots of girls talked about how cute Mr. Warren was, but none of them knew that Miss Dean thought so too. Amy wasn't sure about the school rules. Last month, some 6th graders had gotten in trouble for holding hands. Amy didn't know if teachers had the same rules. She didn't want to get Mr. Warren in trouble, but something this good, she wanted to talk it over with somebody. Amy sat down at her desk. Greg, who sat across from her, was already in his seat. "Hi, Greg," she said. "Hi." Greg didn't look up. He was nice enough, but she only talked to him about school. She'd never talked to him about kissing. Brenda, who sat behind Amy, marched to the front of the room. "Mrs. Banks," she shouted, "some dirty sneak stole my pencil. It was right in the front of my desk, and now it's gone." Mrs. Banks looked at Brenda and laughed. "The same dirty sneak hid the reports I want," Mrs. Banks said. She handed Brenda a pencil. "Use this one." Brenda held up the pencil. "Mine was longer than this, almost new." "You're welcome," Mrs. Banks said, reaching for another pile of papers. The last bell rang. The boys around Sam's desk moved to their seats. Mrs. Banks pushed aside a stack of books and sat on the front of her desk. "Good morning," she said. "This is going to be a special day." "No math today?" Nate asked. "Not for a while," said Mrs. Banks. Everybody cheered, even Amy, and she loved math. "I have a secret to tell you about Mr. Warren," Mrs. Banks said. Amy's mouth dropped open. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This couldn't be her secret, but 2 secrets about Mr. Warren? That was amazing. Just then, Mike came through the door. Uh-oh, somebody said, you better not tell Mike, he'll tell the whole school. Lots of people laughed. Mike's face got red. Amy felt sorry for him. Mike was always nice to her. He was nice to everybody. She didn't like people laughing at him. Come and sit down, Mike, Mrs. Banks said. I was just saying that this is a special day. We're going to plan a surprise party for Mr. Warren. Tomorrow is his birthday. Amy smiled. She felt better. A surprise party was a good secret, but she knew an even better one. How old is he? Brenda asked. That's what makes this special, Mrs. Banks said. He's going to be 30. I didn't think he was that old, one of the boys said. Wow, Sam said. He's as old as my mom. Amy was surprised too. Mr. Warren didn't seem old to her at all. Sometimes he played tetherball or wall ball with the kids. He even jumped rope. I have an idea, Mrs. Banks said. You did wonderful poems for Trent when he was in the hospital, and for Sarah when she was leaving. I think it would be great to do birthday poems for Mr. Warren. We'll have a party tomorrow, and you can read all your poems. And we're supposed to keep this a secret? Somebody asked. I think you can handle that, Mrs. Banks said. We better tape Mike's mouth shut, Fred said. Mike stuck out his tongue. Let's get to work, Mrs. Banks said, and let's try not to do any roses or red poems. I know you did haiku poems in Mr. Warren's class last week. You might do one of those. Amy tried to think of a poem. Maybe she'd write one about 30 candles on a cake, or about having a surprise party. She couldn't decide. She knew one thing her poem wouldn't be about. It would not be about kissing kindergarten teachers. All right, we're going to stop there, and we'll continue with chapter 3 and possibly 4 next time. All right, guys, have a great day. I hope you're getting some exercise outside. See you later.